Everyone, quiet down for a second. Father tapped his champagne glass with a butter knife, and the entire banquet hall obeyed like he had pulled a string. Conversations died. Forks stopped moving. Even the photographer turned his camera toward the small stage near the windows. I stood by the dessert table with a paper plate in my hand, pretending I hadn't noticed my parents avoiding me all afternoon. My mother, Elaine, pressed a hand to her chest and smiled through sudden tears. "We have someone very special to introduce," my father said. The side doors opened. A young woman walked in wearing a cream dress, soft curls, and my grandmother's pearl earrings. My fingers tightened around the paper plate until it bent. People started clapping because they didn't know what they were seeing. Neither did I, not at first. Then my father put his arm around her shoulders. "This," he said proudly, "is Claire, the daughter we should have had." The clapping stopped like someone had cut the sound. Across the room, Aunt Vivian lowered her wineglass. My cousin Natalie turned to look at me with her mouth half open. Someone whispered, "Did he just say that?" My mother stepped beside Claire and touched her cheek like she was presenting a bride, not a stranger. "Has become very dear to us," she said. "She's graceful, ambitious, grateful. Everything we always hoped a daughter could be." Word landed in front of the whole family, and every face turned toward me to see what I would do. I was 28 years old, an elementary school counselor, and still somehow standing there like the little girl who used to wait at the bottom of the stairs for my father to say he was proud of me. He never did. Instead, he looked straight at me from the stage and added almost casually, "Some people are born into blessings and still waste them." A few relatives shifted in their seats. No one laughed. No one defended me. My first instinct was shame. That was what my parents had trained into me. Apologize first, understand later. If they were disappointed, I had failed. If they were cruel, I had provoked it. If they embarrassed me, I was supposed to smile so no one else felt uncomfortable. But then Claire lifted one hand to her ear. The pearls caught the chandelier light. Grandma June's pearls. The same earrings my grandmother had once held in her palm and told me, "When you're 30, these are yours. Not because you become someone impressive. Because you're already mine." Mother had claimed they were locked away for safekeeping. Now they were on a stranger. I stared at Claire's face more carefully. She wasn't confused. She wasn't surprised by the silence. She looked nervous, yes, but not innocent. Like someone waiting for a scene she had rehearsed to reach the difficult part. Then my eyes dropped to my father's suit jacket. A folded document stuck slightly out of the inside pocket. I could only see the top line, but it was enough. Bennett Family Trust. My stomach went cold. This wasn't a family announcement. It wasn't some twisted emotional outburst. My father had brought paperwork to the reunion. He kept smiling, but his eyes sharpened when he saw where I was looking. "Maya," he said, his voice smooth and warning, "this is a moment for maturity." The old me would have swallowed it. The old me would have walked to the bathroom, cried silently, fixed my makeup, and returned before dessert. But something about those earrings changed the room for me. I set the bent paper plate on the dessert table. Then I walked forward until every relative could see my face. My father's smile tightened. My mother whispered, "Don't you dare." I looked at Claire, then at my father, and said loud enough for the whole banquet hall to hear, "Before you call her your daughter, maybe tell everyone what you're paying her for." Claire's face went pale. Before we continue, drop your city and country in the comments below. And if you enjoy revenge stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then my mother crossed the room, so fast, her heels struck the floor like gunshots. "Maya," she said through her teeth, "hallway, now." My father didn't come after me at first. He stayed near Claire, one hand still resting on her shoulder, performing calm for the room. That was his talent. He could ruin your life in public and make everyone wonder why you looked upset. I walked out before my mother could drag me. The banquet hall doors swung shut behind us, cutting off the whispers inside. The hallway smelled like lemon polish and like water from the open windows at the far end. My mother grabbed my arm. "Hard." "What is wrong with you?" she hissed. I looked down at her fingers digging into my skin. "Let go." "You embarrassed us." I laughed once, but there was nothing funny in it. "You introduced a stranger as the daughter you should have had." Elaine's eyes flashed. "Claire is not a stranger. She has been more respectful to us in 6 months than you have been in years." 6 months. That landed. I pulled my arm free. So this has been going on for 6 months. She listens, my mother snapped. She shows interest. She doesn't look down on this family. I'm an elementary school counselor. I work with children whose parents forget to pack them lunch. How exactly is that looking down on anyone? Elaine's mouth tightened the way it always did when my job came up. You had opportunities. No, I said. I had instructions, there's a difference. For a moment, something moved behind her eyes, not guilt, but irritation that I had spoken too clearly. Then I asked the question burning through everything else. Why is she wearing Grandma June's earrings? My mother looked away. That tiny movement hurt worse than any insult. Answer me. They were sitting in a drawer, she said. Claire had the right dress. They suited her. They were promised to me. Your grandmother said a lot of sentimental things near the end. She said it when she was perfectly healthy. Elaine folded her arms. Well, maybe she assumed you would grow into them. I stared at her. There it was, not shouted, not dramatic, just the same quiet knife she had used my whole life. You gave my grandmother's earrings to a woman Dad just called his daughter, I said, because I didn't become the daughter you wanted. My mother stepped closer. You chose a small life, Maya. Do not blame us because someone else knows how to honor the Bennett name. The banquet door opened behind her. My father stepped into the hallway, composed as ever, with Claire a few steps behind him. Claire stayed near the wall, hands clasped in front of her dress, the pearls still shining at her ears. My father gave me the look he used in boardrooms, the one that said I had already lost and just hadn't accepted it yet. That was unnecessary, he said. So was replacing me in front of 80 relatives. No one replaced you, he said smoothly. You removed yourself a long time ago. I looked past him at Claire. Did they tell you to say that too? Claire's lips parted, but my father answered before she could. Claire has been helping us with family matters. What family matters? The kind you never cared enough to understand. I almost smiled at that, because I had spent years setting up reunions, sending birthday cards my mother forgot, driving Elaine to knee surgery appointments, calling relatives when my father was too busy to remember funerals. But none of that counted, because I had not become useful in the way he wanted. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded papers I had seen from across the room. The heading was clear now. Bennett Family Trust, Management Authorization. My pulse jumped. He held the papers out like he was offering me a menu. This reunion was meant to be a fresh start, he said. A chance for you to stop resisting what is best for the family. I didn't touch the document. What is this? A simple authorization, he said. It allows me to manage distributions connected to your portion of the trust. My portion, I repeated. For the good of the family. Elaine softened her voice, which somehow made it worse. Your father knows how to handle these things. You don't. You've never had a head for money. I pay my own bills. You rent a 1-bedroom apartment and drive a 10-year-old car, she said. That is not financial wisdom. That is underachievement. My father took a pen from his pocket. Of course he had brought a pen. Sign it, he said, and we can end this ugliness tonight. I looked at Claire again. She was watching the floor now. And if I do? My father's expression barely changed, but the hallway seemed to shrink around us. Then you go back in there, he said quietly, and explain to everyone why you would rather let this family struggle than cooperate. Elaine added, and do not expect us to defend you after that little performance. That was when I understood. Claire wasn't the wound, she was the pressure. The announcement, the earrings, the speech about the daughter they should have had, all of it had been staged to make me unstable enough, humiliated enough, desperate enough to sign whatever he put in front of me. I looked down at the papers. Then I looked at the pen. No. My father blinked once. Elaine inhaled sharply. Maya. I said no. Richard's smile disappeared so completely, it felt like watching a mask slide off. You are making a mistake. No, I said, reaching for the banquet room door. I think I finally stopped making the same one. My mother's voice dropped behind me. Then don't come back into that room expecting us to defend you. I put my hand on the handle anyway. Before I could turn it, Claire moved. She stepped between me and the door, close enough that I could see her fingers trembling against the side of her dress. Her voice came out low. You really don't know why they chose me, do you? Claire's question hung in the hallway, like a match held too close to dry paper. I looked at her, waiting. For the first time since she had walked into the banquet hall, Claire didn't look polished. She looked young, cornered. Her eyes flicked past me to my father, then back to my face. Claire, Richard said, voice flat. She shut her mouth. That told me enough to stop waiting for answers in the hallway. I stepped around her and pushed open the banquet room doors. Every head turned. The room had changed while I was gone. People were no longer pretending this was normal. My Aunt Vivian stood near the front table with her arms folded. Cousin Natalie had moved closer to the aisle. The photographer hovered beside his tripod, unsure whether he was documenting a reunion or a family crime scene. My father followed me in quickly, already adjusting his expression. Everyone, he said, lifting one hand, I apologize for the interruption. Maya has always struggled with emotional moments. There it was. The label before the evidence. I walked toward the center of the room. Don't apologize for me. Elaine came in behind him, eyes glassy, one hand pressed to her collarbone. Claire entered last, staying near the wall instead of returning to my father's side. Richard ignored me and turned back to the guests. As I was saying, he continued, Claire will be joining the Bennett Family Foundation as our new legacy director. A murmur passed through the room. Legacy director. I had helped set up foundation toy drives since I was 16. I had sorted donated coats in church basements while my parents smiled for photos and left early. I had never heard that title once. My Uncle Graham frowned. Richard, when did the foundation create that position? My father smiled at him. Recently, it's part of a broader restructuring. Was there a board vote? Graham asked. Richard's smile thinned. This isn't the time for administrative details. A few relatives clapped uncertainly, the kind of clapping people do when they want tension to end more than they want to celebrate. Claire stood frozen beside a framed photo display of past reunions, wearing my grandmother's pearls while my grandmother's face smiled from a picture behind her. Then my father turned the knife in public. Maya, unfortunately, has refused to participate in the family's future, he said. Despite having been blessed with resources that could help all of us, she continues to think only of herself. The room went quiet again, but this silence was different, curious, hungry. My uncle's frown deepened. What resources? Richard gave a soft, tired laugh. Graham, please. No, Graham said. You brought it up. My father glanced at me. Certain assets were left after my mother-in-law passed. Maya has chosen to treat them as personal property rather than family responsibility. Aunt Vivian's face sharpened. Grandma June had not been my father's mother-in-law to everyone in that room. To Vivian, she had been her sister. I felt Natalie appear beside me. Her voice was barely a whisper. Maya, vendors have been calling my mom. I didn't look at her. What vendors? The florist from last year, the catering company from Uncle Paul's anniversary. They said your dad delayed payments. Mom told me not to get involved, but, she swallowed. I think the business is in trouble. The pieces shifted. Not fully into place, but enough to make my stomach drop. My father didn't just want control because he hated being told no. He needed money. Across the room, Claire tried to smile at an older cousin who was staring openly at her earrings. The smile didn't hold. Aunt Vivian spoke next. Claire, dear, how exactly do you know Richard and Elaine? Claire straightened. Mrs. Bennett mentored me after we met at a charity luncheon. My mother nodded too fast. Yes, she was so impressive, so naturally gracious. I turned slowly toward Elaine. What charity luncheon? Claire blinked. The spring one. There were 3 spring luncheons, I said. Her fingers touched the pearls again. I don't remember the exact name. That's strange, I said, because Mom missed the Bennett Women's League luncheon after her knee surgery. I drove her to physical therapy that whole week. Elaine's crying stopped. Just stopped. A few people looked at her. I kept my voice even. So what date was the luncheon? Claire looked at my father. Richard stepped forward. Enough. This interrogation proves exactly what I mean. She is jealous, unstable, and determined to humiliate anyone who receives affection she believes belongs to her. My face burned, but I didn't answer quickly. I let his words sit in the room. Then Elaine covered her mouth and let out a broken little sob. I can't do this, she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. I cannot keep pretending Maya hasn't broken our hearts. Some relatives softened immediately. That was my mother's gift. She could turn a knife into a tear and make people forget who was bleeding. Richard placed an arm around her. You see, he said to the room, this is why we wanted today to be positive. Claire represents healing, a future, a chance for this family to move beyond bitterness. Then he looked at the photographer. Let's take the family portrait now. The photographer lifted his camera halfway. Sir, I'm not sure. Now, Richard said. He began arranging people before anyone agreed. Elaine stood at his side, dabbing her eyes. He motioned Claire forward and placed her exactly where I had always stood in family photos, front row, between him and my mother. Then he looked at me. Maya has chosen to separate herself from this family. The sentence hit the room like a verdict. Claire's face tightened. She didn't move away from my parents, but she no longer looked proud to stand there. Aunt Vivian took one step toward me, but I lifted my hand slightly. Not yet. The photographer looked through the lens. His finger hovered over the button. That was when I walked straight into the frame. I stood beside Claire, close enough that the pearls almost touched my shoulder. My father's jaw clenched. Maya, he warned. I looked into the camera, then at him. Take the picture, I said, because my lawyer is going to want proof. The photographer lowered the camera. Not slowly, not politely. He lowered it like he had just realized the picture might become evidence. My father turned on him first. I said take the picture. The man swallowed. Mr. Bennett, I think maybe everyone needs a minute. No, Richard snapped. What everyone needs is for my daughter to stop making threats at a family event. I stood beside Claire in the front row, close enough to see the pulse fluttering in her throat. Which daughter? I asked. A few people gasped. Someone near the back muttered, "Oh, God." My father's face reddened, but he kept his voice controlled. Maya, this is beneath you. No, I said. What's beneath me is signing trust papers in a hallway after you humiliated me in front of everyone. That changed the room. The whispers stopped turning in circles and landed on one point. Papers. Trust. Hallway. Uncle Graham stepped forward. Richard, what papers? My father smiled like he was tired of unreasonable people. Private family documents. I'm family. Not this branch, Elaine said sharply. Aunt Vivian's head turned toward her. Excuse me. Elaine realized too late how that sounded. I reached for Natalie without looking away from my father. Record this. Natalie's hand shook as she pulled out her phone, but she did it. She tapped the screen and held it at her waist, angled toward the front of the room. Richard saw it. Natalie, he said, warning her now too, put that away. She didn't. That was the first crack I could actually hear. I turned to Claire. How did you know about the earrings? Claire looked at my mother. I followed her gaze. Not her, you. Claire wet her lips. Mrs. Bennett told me they were important. When? Recently. That's not an answer. My father stepped closer. She doesn't owe you an explanation. She's wearing my grandmother's earrings while standing in my spot in the family portrait after you introduced her as the daughter you should have had, I said. She owes everyone an explanation. Claire flinched. I kept going, because if I stopped, my father would fill the silence. How did you know I work as a school counselor? She blinked. Your parents told me. And that they call it a small life. Elaine's face tightened. Claire hesitated. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do, I said. In the hallway, Mom used the same phrase she's used for years. A small life. Dad used the same line he always uses when he wants me to feel guilty about not joining his company. You weren't surprised by any of it. Claire's eyes moved toward the exit. Why? Richard's voice cut in. Because you have always been difficult to manage. The words dropped into the room wrong. Not difficult to love. Not difficult to understand. Difficult to manage. Natalie's phone stayed pointed at him. Aunt Vivian's expression went cold. Uncle Graham stared at Richard like he was seeing him clearly for the first time. I said, there it is. Richard's mouth tightened. Do not twist my words. I don't have to. They came out straight. Elaine stepped forward, her tears gone now. This is exactly why we needed help. You turn everything into an attack. No, Aunt Vivian said. Everyone looked at her. She moved from beside the table with the old family photos and stood between me and my parents. She was 71, small, silver-haired, and suddenly the strongest person in the room. June created that trust so Richard could never touch Maya's share. My father went still. The room seemed to inhale. Aunt Vivian looked at me. Your grandmother worried about this before she died. She said your father thought every family asset should pass through his hands. Richard gave a short laugh. Vivian, you're confused. I am not. Her voice sharpened. 2 weeks ago, someone from your office called me. They asked whether I would support a statement that Maya was unfit to manage her own money. My chest tightened. Elaine said, that was not what. Vivian cut her off. They used the word fitness. They asked whether Maya was emotionally reactive, whether she had a history of poor judgment, whether the family had concerns. The banquet hall blurred at the edges. For a moment, I wasn't standing at a reunion anymore. I was back in every dinner where my father called me sensitive, every birthday where my mother said I was dramatic, every phone call where they made me apologize for having a boundary. They hadn't just been insulting me. They had been building a file. Uncle Graham turned to Richard. You tried to have her declared incapable. Richard's face hardened. Don't be absurd. Then why did you bring management authorization papers tonight? I asked. He didn't answer. Claire made a small sound. Not a sob, not exactly. More like air leaving someone who had been holding her breath for too long. I turned to her. What did they tell you? Richard pointed at her. Claire, don't. That was the wrong thing to say. Now everyone looked at Claire. She stared at the floor, fingers still brushing the pearl earrings. He said Maya had agreed. My father's voice dropped. Claire. She swallowed. He said she didn't want the responsibility anymore, that she was stepping aside but needed help saving face. My mother whispered, stop talking. Claire looked at me then, and the polished stranger from the beginning of the night was gone. He said you were cruel, that you were keeping money your grandmother meant for the whole family. He said I was helping repair something you broke. My hands went cold, but my voice stayed steady. Step aside for who? Claire's eyes filled with fear. She looked at my father. Before she could answer, Richard moved. He snatched the trust papers off the small table where he had set them down and headed for the side exit, fast enough that his chair scraped hard against the floor behind him. Richard, Aunt Vivian shouted. Natalie's phone followed him. I took one step after him. Then the banquet doors opened. A man in a dark suit stood in the doorway, holding a sealed envelope in one hand. My father stopped dead. The man looked directly at him and said, Richard, don't take another step. The man in the doorway was Mr. Caldwell. I knew him from Grandma June's funeral. He was the attorney who had stood beside Aunt Vivian while my father complained that the will was needlessly complicated. Back then, I thought he looked tired. Now he looked prepared. My father's hand tightened around the trust papers. This is a private family event. Mr. Caldwell stepped into the banquet hall. Not anymore. Aunt Vivian exhaled beside me, like she had been holding that breath for 2 weeks. Richard looked at her. You called him. Vivian didn't blink. After your office called me asking whether I would help question Maya's fitness, yes. I called the one person June trusted more than any of us. Mr. Caldwell lifted the sealed envelope. Maya, your grandmother's trust is very clear. Your parents cannot redirect your share. They cannot manage it, borrow against it, or appoint a substitute beneficiary unless you sign willingly, or unless a court declares you legally incapable of handling your own affairs. The room went silent in a different way now. Not shocked. Listening. My father gave a tight laugh. No one was declaring anyone incapable. Then why, Mr. Caldwell asked, did your office request preliminary language for a family-supported competency petition? Aunt Vivian's hand found mine. I didn't squeeze back at first. I couldn't. My fingers felt numb. Elaine's face had gone gray beneath her makeup. Richard was only trying to protect the family. No, I said, looking at her. You were trying to make me look unstable. She opened her mouth. I didn't let her speak first this time. You knew exactly what would happen if Dad called another woman the daughter he should have had. You knew what those earrings meant. You knew everyone would stare at me, waiting for me to fall apart. And when I reacted, you were ready to cry and tell them I had broken your heart. My mother looked around the room, but there was nowhere safe for her eyes to land. Mr. Caldwell placed the envelope on the nearest table. I have copies of correspondence from Richard's office. I also have the message Vivian forwarded me. It matches the pattern Maya is describing. Uncle Graham turned toward my father slowly. Is the business really that bad? Richard's jaw moved once. That was answer enough. Mr. Caldwell continued. There are delayed vendor payments, outstanding credit obligations, and several business accounts under review. Maya's trust was never intended to cover those losses. A murmur spread through the banquet hall. Not gossip this time, recognition. Natalie still held her phone up. Claire suddenly reached for the earrings. Everyone watched as her hands trembled at her ears. I didn't know all of that, she said. My father snapped, Claire. She flinched, but she didn't stop. He told me Maya was spoiled, Claire said, voice shaking. He said she was refusing to help anyone, that she wanted the money but not the family. He said she had already agreed to step aside, but she might act difficult because she hated being replaced. Replaced, Aunt Vivian repeated coldly. Claire looked at me, and for the first time, she didn't look like someone trying to win a place beside my parents. She looked like someone realizing what that place cost. He gave me the earrings this morning, she said. He said wearing them would send a message. Elaine whispered, You ungrateful girl. Vivian stepped toward Claire and held out her palm. Take them off. Claire removed the pearl earrings and placed them in Vivian's hand. My mother reached for them automatically. Vivian pulled back. June left these for the granddaughter who loved her, she said, not the daughter-in-law who resented her. Elaine's hand dropped as if she had been slapped. My father looked at Mr. Caldwell. You have no authority to embarrass me in front of my family. Mr. Caldwell's voice stayed calm. I have authority to protect the trust, and after tonight, I'll be filing notice to remove you from any advisory role connected to it. That was the first real loss I saw hit my father. Not my pain, not Claire's confession, not the silence of the family. Control. His face changed when he understood he had lost control. I stepped closer to him. The worst part isn't that you needed money. His eyes cut to mine. It's that you thought the easiest way to get it was to break me in public. For once, Richard Bennett had no polished answer ready. The aftermath began before the reunion ended. Natalie sent the recording into the family group chat while people were still standing under the chandeliers. Relatives who had clapped for Claire 20 minutes earlier now stepped away from my parents as if their shame might stain. Uncle Graham left without shaking my father's hand. Aunt Vivian stayed beside me until I could breathe normally again. Within days, vendors started talking. The unpaid invoices Richard had hidden became impossible to dismiss. 2 family investors pulled their support from his company. Elaine was quietly removed from the charity committee after several members saw the video and learned she had helped stage the reunion introduction to pressure me over the trust. Claire turned over her messages to Mr. Caldwell. They showed the promises clearly: a foundation salary, a housing stipend, and a vague future family benefit once I signed the authorization. I did not hug her. I did not pretend we were friends. But when she apologized, I believed she finally understood she had been used too. I left that reunion without signing a single page. Weeks later, I moved into Grandma June's old cottage by the maple trees. I used part of my trust to fund a counseling program at my school, one that paid for meals, supplies, and emergency support for children whose families were quietly falling apart behind respectable doors. I also signed one document of my own, a legal notice blocking my parents from contacting me about money. The relatives who wanted a relationship with me came separately after that. No speeches, no performances, no family portrait arranged around my father's approval. On my 30th birthday, Aunt Vivian came to the cottage with a small velvet box. Inside were Grandma June's pearl earrings, cleaned and restored. This time, no one announced my worth to a room. No one compared me to anyone. Vivian simply fastened the earrings for me, kissed my cheek, and said she would be proud of the woman who walked out. And I finally understood that walking out of that reunion was not losing my family. It was leaving the people who had mistaken control for love.